Have you ever wanted to make your own fishing baits that actually can catch some fish and it's cheap and super easy? That's exactly what we're going to do. Alright, the first thing we need to get into is exactly what you're going to need to create your own molds and pour your own plastic baits. First, you're going to need a cardboard box. A cardboard box about this size will do. You can cut it and resize it as necessary. The next thing you're going to need is some clear boxing tape. This comes in handy when we reconstruct your box to a different size and get it ready to pour the mold. Next, some plaster of Paris. You can pick this up from any retail store pretty much for hardly any investment at all. Most come with about 4 to 5 pounds. Generally, you'll only need about a pound to make a mold. Today we're going to use 2 pounds just to be safe. The next item that you need is some modeling clay. Some very easy, inexpensive modeling clay from any retail store will do. The color doesn't matter. This allows you to create the shape of your own bait if that's what you choose to do. You'll need a glass 1-cup measuring cup with a pour spout and handle. This comes in handy when you melt down your plastics or reused baits later on to pour your final baits. You can have an additional 1-cup measuring cup if you're looking at pouring multiple colored baits. Now, the final thing you're going to need is some plastic to melt down to pour your baits out of. In this scenario, we're reusing old baits. I will note technically you're supposed to include some plastisol, you can Google that, into your melted down baits that have been reused to improve their quality of plastic, but I can tell you, baits that have been gently used, this process works really well in creating baits you can use, have fun, and catch some fish with, and save yourself a ton of money. But as you progress from this beginner stage and get more into the hobby of creating your own baits, there are a multitude of ways to do this in a much better process, all the way up to injection molding and even creating your own plastic resin and dyeing it in your own colors with your own glitters. Alright, let's get started. This box is a little too big for the size mold that we want to make. We're focusing on a mold that can house a 7-inch trick worm and account for having about 4 to 5 cavities inside of it to pour multiple baits at one time. We're going to cut down this box and restructure it to a size that we need, utilizing some of the clear boxing tape that we mentioned earlier. Once we got the box reconstructed to the size that we're looking for, we're going to use the clear boxing tape to seal all the seams inside and out so that when we pour the plaster of Paris in, nothing leaks out and creates a huge mess that you can get in trouble for and have to clean up later. Apply the boxing tape to the entire surface of the bottom of the box to ensure a smooth area for your pour to go in on. Now, you can take an old bait that you've purchased from a retailer, put it in this box and pour your plaster of Paris over it and create a mold for it. But all of the fun is creating a designed bait that came out of your own hands and fingers that you can later catch a fish on. So now we're going to take the modeling clay and we're going to start rolling out a trick worm about 7 inches long, standard worm diameter, with a ball on the end of it to give it some really cool finesse action. We do that by kneading the clay in our hands and across the table in different fashions to secure the final shape that we need. Oh, it's starting to take form. It's starting to look like something that might catch some fish. Now we're getting somewhere. See what I'm saying? Creating your own design is very rewarding. Oh yeah, that definitely looks like something that'll catch some fish. Now if you want to create a multi-cavity tool, repeat that 4 more times to create a 5-cavity tool and get them as close to the same design as possible. Now that your box is built and your design is finished, place your molded baits inside of the box and press them down firmly so that when you pour the plaster of Paris, it doesn't get in underneath the design of your bait. Once you have pressed it down and have it firmly in there, you're going to need to grab a Q-tip. You can gently use this Q-tip across your bait that you have molded to smooth out the surface so that you create a really nice slick lure after the pour. You might want to get a flashlight. It's hard to see all the little discrepancies that may have happened in the bait you molded with your hands. That allows you to easily get out all the little flaws with the Q-tip so that you have this really cool bait once it's all said and done. There you go. Now, just do that 4 more times and your multi-cavity mold is just about ready. Alright, now it's time to make a mess. It's time to mix up your plaster of Paris and get it ready. Follow the instructions on your box. In this example, like I said, we're going to be using 2 pounds. All you got to do is add the specific amount of water, get it stirred up real nice and easy, and then you're going to gently pour it into the box that you created that contains your hand-sculpted baits of your very own design. Make sure you level your box to ensure that your mold comes out and sits on a flat surface appropriately for better, easier pours. Let's wait, it's got to dry. After a quick 30 minutes, your mold is set up and ready to get cut out of the box. Just cut the corners of the box all the way through the tape that you placed, fold each side down, and the mold will come out. Be very careful. You don't want to break the mold at this point. It's very discouraging, I promise you. Flip the mold over, lay it down, there's the bait that you created. Now you're going to need some Q-tips and toothpicks. We're going to use the toothpick to help extract your hand molded bait out of the cavity of the tool. Remember, if you made a multi-cavity tool, you'll have to do this 5 times or for however many cavities you actually made. Let's get this thing out of here. It can be a tedious process, but once you get all of that modeling clay out of there, the next step is to use the toothpick to actually add some intricacies and the overall shape of your bait. You're going to have to do a little finessing to your finesse bait. Alright, it's starting to look like the cavity of a mold of a hand-poured bait, isn't it? Almost. Now you need to grab a Q-tip and go through and massage and rub the insides of the cavity to get out all the little discrepancies that may have formed during the pour process and getting the hand molded bait out of there. This will ensure that when you pour your bait, it's nice and smooth and comes out amazing. Now that looks like a cavity ready to pour. Or is it? Alright, we're almost there, but grab that toothpick. We're going to add some intricacies to your wonderful little bait. On this particular one, we're going to add some ribs at 2 points in the worm to promote some really cool finesse movements underwater. For other baits, such as swim baits, you can add eyes, gills, or even get really intricate and add some scaly textures to the sides of your baits. Now that looks like something we're ready to put some resin in. Well, first we got to melt some plastic. Like I said, we're using some old baits in this one. So we're going to grab some scissors. We're going to cut this up into tiny little pieces and put it inside of our 1 cup glass measuring cup. Alright, it's all cut up, and in the measuring cup, it's time to melt it down in the microwave. Pro tip, you're going to want a glove or something because that thing gets hot. Alright, grab a butter knife. Don't worry, this is one that you can wash and reuse. We're going to melt this down in the microwave starting at 30-second increments. This is important. You don't want to burn your resin. You want to melt it to a point where it's extremely hot, steaming, and a nice smooth flowing liquid. But if you burn it, especially with your lighter colors, it can really make an impact on the final color. You can literally burn white and make it look brown, so pay attention. As you can see from the first 30 seconds, there's not a whole lot of progress, but you want to stir it anyhow and go ahead and put it back in for another 30 seconds. We will continue to repeat this process at 30-second intervals until we get this. This is the perfect consistency that we want. We are ready to pour. Remember, this is a part where you need to be a little safe. Use a glove or a mitt. That cup is hot and that resin is hot. Do not get it on yourself. Alright, it's time to pour! Yeah, I know, corny, but nonetheless, this is the cool part because you're almost at the end. This is the part where you can mess up pretty quick. And if you mess up a little, don't worry. This takes some practice. Pouring takes practice, especially with a new bait design, because every bait pours different. The general rule of thumb is with these worms, start at one end and kind of pour all the way down to the other. You will see the cavity begin to collect and rise. You want the resin to rise a little bit higher than the actual flush top because that resin will shrink as it begins to cool and become more of a solid texture. Alright, we've waited a few minutes, it's cooled, it's safe to pull out. Look at that, isn't that awesome? That is your own designed bait out of a mold you made and poured. This is your bait. It's time to go catch some fish. But first, all you gotta do is pull these little scraggly pieces off or even use a small pair of intricate scissors and you can make this bait look absolutely perfect. That is amazing, isn't it? You can really catch fish with this. Now it's time to get creative with different designs, different colors, and have your fun with it. Alright, you're done. Now what do? You go fishing, of course. No, you need to put this in some type of a bag. Standard Ziploc bags are great. 2 pro tips. Add some baking spray or some canola oil or vegetable oil and some salt in the bag, and then cover the oil across the actual baits inside of the bag along with the salt, and you've actually created something where those plastics are so new and so poor they will absorb those oils and that salt, and it will actually give your baits a flavored attractant to the fish that you're searching for. Another pro tip, as your mold begins to age, it will get drier and drier. You're going to eventually want to start spraying each cavity with a little bit of vegetable oil prior to pouring the resin in it so that it doesn't stick to the mold for future pours. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are saying, look at all that unused space on this mold. Well, that's the beauty of these types of molds, is right now while the mold is still fairly soft, I can use a Q-tip and a toothpick and hand design and carve in a brand new bait. You can also, later on down the road, once your mold hardens, actually cover it with water and get it softened and do this, even if the mold is a year old. So let's design something real quick. We got this extra space. How about a little maybe 2-inch type of grub bait of some sort that will probably catch something? See what I did there? I used a toothpick to etch out a general design that I wanted. Then I flipped the toothpick, broke it off and made it blunt, and used it to dig out the depth of the design and the overall shape of the design that I wanted. Now I can use this Q-tip to smooth it out and make it a cavity that's ready to pour. Alright, here we go. Let's pour this little tiny impromptu bait that I just made. Remember, use that glove. Those cups get super hot. Alright, let's take this little booger out of here. It's all cooled up. See, that's a really cool little impromptu bait. It'll catch some crappie, some bluegill, something, white bass. Look at this 7-inch worm. Amazing. Look at the action on it. These baits will catch fish, and you design them yourself out of your own hands. You created everything on your own. It is definitely a rewarding little fun thing to do, and especially when you go set the hook on a fish with your very own bait. I hope you enjoy this. It's just a really fun hobby. I hope one day that you can take this hobby and I'll see your baits hanging in a bag on the pegs of Bass Pro. Again, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, just let us know. We'll be glad to help. And remember, you saw it all on Outdoors in the Bluegrass.